You stand in a quiet Tuscan villa, where sunlight once danced across marble floors. Now, the air is heavy with rosemary, sweat, and something darker. Behind silk curtains lies a young woman, pale as winter, lips tinged blue, her crown slipped from a life already ended. Yet someone refuses to let her go. Beside her sits a man born to rule a Renaissance empire. Francesco de' Medici. His eyes are hollow, his fingers trembling, not from grief, but from obsession. He whispers to her as if words could stitch life back into her veins. But death does not bargain with kings. Her body has been opened, organs removed, cavities filled with spices, flesh sewn shut like a dressmaker's gown. He returns every day, speaking to what is already gone. Power has left him, madness has arrived, wearing memory as a mask. Centuries later, psychologists call it complicated grief disorder, sorrow consuming the living more than death consumes the dead. But in 1577, no one stops it. No priest, no physician, no whisper of mercy. Sometimes, in palaces of gold, love rots faster than any corpse. Some kings drown their enemies in blood. This one drowned himself in devotion the world could not understand. Breathe, feel the silence grow heavy when love refuses to let go. And no, this story does not begin with death, it begins with a dynasty built on brilliance, and a boy unready to rule. Florence once walked like a god in Europe. The Medici name whispered through palaces, through banks, through the Vatican itself. They shaped popes, crowned kings, created artists who painted eternity across chapel ceilings. To be born a Medici was to step into the world not as flesh and blood, but as force, as destiny. And yet, destiny does not always choose the strongest heart to carry its weight. Francesco de' Medici, son of Cosimo I, did not roar like his father. Where Cosimo was marble and iron, Francesco was soft earth and restless water. He watched power more than he wielded it. He listened to walls as though they might confess ancient secrets. He preferred solitude over ceremony, alchemy tables over war councils, minerals and herbs over matters of state. Court chroniclers called him melancholic. His tutors called him brilliant but strange. His father called him heir, and that was pressure enough to begin the crack inside him. He walked through corridors lined with portraits of conquerors and thinkers, each face pressing expectation into his bones. And while Florence hummed with color and progress, Francesco grew fascinated not by life, but by the mechanics of it, by decay, by transformation, by the delicate threads that hold breath inside a body. His room smelled always of mercury, arsenic, tinctures, powders. Curiosity, yes, but perhaps also destiny in a darker shape. Sometimes, the mind that seeks to understand death becomes its servant before it understands life. For even kings to be our children once, and children need warmth. But Florence offered him only duty, formality, and shadows where affection should have been. His heart, unanchored, sought belonging like a candle seeks flame. And a man who never learns how to love, learns instead how to cling. Power does not always shape kings, sometimes it isolates them. Listen. Footsteps echo in empty palace halls not because no one walks them, but because Jean of Austria arrived in Florence not as a woman, but as an alliance. A princess of the Habsburg blood, she carried empires in her lineage, discipline in her posture, and Catholic piety as strict as armor. She greeted the city with humility, with grace, with expectation. But marriage, even royal marriage, is a garden that must be watered. And in this garden, the soil was already dry. Francesco greeted her as one greets a ceremony, polite, distant, formal. She was dutiful. He was detached. She tried to please the court with dignity, offering kindness where court ladies expected arrogance. Yet, the palace did not warm to her, and neither did her husband. They produced children because the throne demanded heirs, not because affection demanded closeness. Nights passed like winter floors, cold, ceremonial, with silence sleeping between them like a third presence. Whispers began almost instantly. She is stiff. She is foreign. She is unloved. Some nights she prayed for warmth that never came. Other nights she stood at the window and watched Florentine carriages pass below, each lantern glowing like a tiny world she could never enter. A queen in name, a guest in her own marriage. But the cruelest wound came not from coldness, but betrayal. For Francesco did not simply drift from her. He drifted toward someone else, someone fiery where Jean was calm, seductive where she was formal, dangerous where she was safe. And when that woman entered their world, the palace no longer whispered, it sneered. Some crowns are worn in silence, and some in humiliation. Feel it, the sting of being present yet unseen. A queen's dignity should shield her. But her enemy did not wear armor, she wore perfume. Bianca Capello was many things: Venetian beauty, scandal maker, survivor of a forbidden elopement. She was not royal by birth, but she carried ambition like silk. When Francesco met her, desire replaced reason. Bianca did not simply charm, she possessed. A woman of wit and warmth, she understood what Francesco craved: connection, admiration, devotion untainted by duty. Soon, he visited her more often than his own wife. Their affair spread across Europe like wildfire. Venice whispered. Vienna frowned. Rome scoffed. Florence divided into camps, those who adored Bianca's brilliance, and those who feared her ambition. Jean endured it all, every rumor, every stolen glance at court, every painful moment when Bianca's name carried more heat than hers. And then, scandal turned sinister. Bianca's husband died suddenly, violently, mysteriously. Poison, some said. Arranged, others whispered. Francesco married Jean still, yet his heart, and perhaps his conscience, bled toward Bianca. What began as passion decayed into obsession. And obsession, when mixed with power, always demands sacrifice. Hear the unspoken truth: sometimes the deadliest rival is the one your husband cannot stop loving. And in Tuscan heat, obsession tastes like poison. The summer of 1577 arrived heavy and breathless, pressing heat into every stone of the Medici villa in Poggio a Caiano. Jean, pale and weary, traveled there seeking relief from illness and court pressure. But relief did not come. Instead, agony crept in slowly, then seized her without mercy. Witnesses recalled her violent retching, her cries, her stomach twisted in unbearable pain. Fever, they said, but fever does not tear a woman from life like a blade made of fire. Jean begged for her husband, but he did not come. He sat with Bianca instead, wrapped not in grief, but in the warm glow of forbidden comfort. Some servants later insisted that Jean whispered Bianca's name as she suffered, not in accusation, but in resignation. After hours of torment, her body grew still. 32 years old. A queen unloved, a wife abandoned, a life cut short not by fate alone, but by human intention, or human indifference. No physician pushed for autopsy. No priest demanded investigation. A single line recorded her death: fever. But fever does not twist intestines. Fever does not burn organs from within. Fever does not match the violent end described in secret letters across Europe. Poison does. And when her body cooled, and prayers faded, a new horror began, not of death, but of what follows when a man refuses to let death finish its work. Truth dies quietly when kings hold the quill. Breathe in, rosemary, sorrow, and the weight of unanswered cries. Death took her body. But grief took her far more slowly, and not only hers. They brought her body to the quiet room, draped in silk, as priests murmured Latin and servants trembled. Embalmers worked not with reverence, but urgency. Her abdomen opened, organs removed, salts and herbs stuffed inside to delay decay. Needles pierced flesh where words had failed to pierce her husband's heart. Threads slipped through skin, closing what death had opened. A queen's body, sewn like cloth, held together not by dignity, but by someone else's desperate need. And then he arrived. Francesco. Not in command, but in collapse. He sat beside her for days, whispering to her still face, calling her by name. Some say he asked forgiveness. Others say he begged her to return. Some servants swore he believed she still heard him. A king at the height of power, reduced to a man grasping at memory like a drowning soul clutches air. He touched her hair, smoothed her cold hands, wept into linen sheets. Every sunrise brought him back to her side. Every prayer ended with silence. Death, once feared, became his only audience. Was it guilt? Was it love found too late? Or was it the first fracture of a mind already strained by mercury fumes, poison potions, years of restless alchemy? Maybe grief is not madness. Maybe guilt is its own disease. Florence murmured. Vienna watched. Rome judged. And the world learned this truth. When power cannot revive the dead, it exposes the living. Close your eyes, hear a whisper meant for a soul no longer here. What is more haunting? Death? Or the refusal to accept it? Weeks after Jean was buried, scandal became triumph for one woman, Bianca Capello. Francesco married her quickly, boldly, defiantly. The Medici court shuddered. Europe gasped. A queen replaced by a mistress, not after mourning, but after breath had barely left the dead queen's lips. But history does not offer victory without consequence. 10 years later, in the same villa where Jean had gasped her last breath, Francesco and Bianca fell ill together. Fever, they claimed. But Florence had learned to recognize poison when it saw it. Their bodies convulsed, weakened, surrendered, as a new player stepped forward, Ferdinando, Francesco's brother. Calm. Calculated. Ready. Modern forensic science confirmed what whispers knew: arsenic filled their hair, their bones, their remains. Francesco, the alchemist, was killed by poison. Bianca, the flame that burned too bright, extinguished in the same fire she once ignited. Ferdinando became Grand Duke, and history wrote Bianca not as queen, but as stain. He erased her portraits, her honors, her memory. What he could not erase, rumor completed. In the end, the villa held 3 corpses tied by one kingdom's hunger. A queen unloved. A ruler unmoored. A mistress undone by ambition. History does not forgive, it erases. Sit quietly, hear the footsteps of revenge walking halls where love once whispered. Some crowns are won by blood, others by waiting for death. Modern scholars study what happened here not as gossip, but as pathology. Mercury fumes, arsenic mixtures, alchemical experiments, substances that slowly unravel the mind. Francesco's melancholy deepened into obsession. His grief became fixation. Complicated grief disorder, delusional bereavement, trauma locked inside privilege. We call it psychology now. Back then, they called it fate. And Jean? A woman whose greatest flaw was being dutiful in a world that rewarded volatility. Today, doctors recognize the cruelty she endured: emotional isolation, public humiliation, chronic stress. Scholars see the power politics of her death. Foreign princesses rarely died quietly in rival courts. Forensic chemistry confirms toxins. Mental health experts read Francesco's vigil not as romance, but a cry from a fractured mind trying to hold reality hostage. Look to the modern world and you will see the pattern still. Leaders cut off from truth. Power warping affection into control. Grief turning into obsession. Love strangled by ego. History does not repeat, people do. Those who cannot face their fears do not overcome them, they serve them. Let your breath slow, imagine grief with no guidance, power with no peace. This is not a love story. It is a lesson written in bone and silence. A queen died alone. A king spoke to her corpse. A mistress rose and fell. A brother took power through poison. A dynasty survived, but its heart decayed long before its bodies did. In a palace of art and genius, love turned cruel, loyalty turned corrosive, and grief turned into something darker than madness, a memory that would not stay buried. Florence remembers their names not in celebration, but in caution. Because sometimes, the most terrifying ghosts are not those who died, but those who could not let the dead rest. Power does not protect the human soul. It exposes it. And kings, for all their crowns, break just like the rest of us. Some ghosts do not haunt halls, they haunt hearts. A last breath, a stitched wound, a whisper into stillness. History moves on. But sorrow stays.